What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to build up your roster and specifically talking about the buildup of high potential players and high value assets within your organization and strategies to capitalize on that. Basically, what I want to kind of talk about is why I add all A and B and C potential players into my organization and pretty much get rid of D potential players as quickly as possible. Now, in this Pirates franchise, it's not to the extreme. You will still see quite a few C potential players and even a handful of D potential players in my farm system. But when we go to other franchises that I play within MLB The Show, if I'm really trying hard, I follow a different approach. What I tend to do, and we're going to load up an Oakland A's franchise here for you guys to see real quick, is I tend to completely fill out my entire system with A potential players, B potential players, and it becomes very, very noticeable that that's something that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to load up on those players as much as I possibly can. Well, a question that I get on that sometimes, and a question that I pose to you is, well, why would I be doing that? Why would I not just manage some of the C potential guys and some of the D potential filler guys? Why do I need so many A and B potential players? Why do I actively go out and make it so that every one of my right fielders has A or B potential, so that almost every one of my center fielders has A or B potential? Same thing at left field, same thing at shortstop, so on and so forth. You guys can see that pretty much every single one of these positions is filled with only A and B potential players. And the answer is not as obvious as you might think. It is not just straight up the developmental side of things. It's not just that I want A potential players that are going to develop into really good players. Yeah, there is that side of things. I do specifically think it is worthwhile loading up on A, B, and B potential players if you can, because they're going to get more guaranteed development on a year-to-year basis than you would out of anybody else. Just putting in A potential player down in single A, they're going to get 4 or 5 overall points that you're not otherwise going to get out of a C or D potential player that's sitting in single A. So there is that added benefit. The thing to consider on that end, though, is that you're then potentially wasting that. So if you do have an A potential guy sitting in single A, he's wasting development when he could be in double A getting games and developing even further. So there's, some question marks surrounding why would I do this? Why would I fill out my entire system with guys knowing that they can't all play in the system that I already have, and knowing that, for example, I can't start 4 first basemen at once, or if I go over to second base, I can't start these 3 A potential guys all at once, or if I go to my other positions, outfield, I can't start all of these guys in the MLB whenever they do get to that point, and a lot of these guys are going to develop at the same rate, and they're going to hit MLB ready at around the same point. That's not going to be 100% effective, but the chances are they are going to develop really well. And that in and of itself is one advantage. That is kind of what we've already talked about. You want to have players that can develop well, that are going to get guaranteed development within the game and develop at a faster rate and be more productive for your organization. But it's not just that, it's about the value of those players. You want to develop assets within your organization that you can utilize for the future of your organization in other ways. There are so many strategies to building a team, and it is not just through the prospects that you have. It is not just through developing the players that are within your farm system. So the short answer, and we'll dive into it further, but the short answer is that you're developing assets that you can then flip into players that you need on your team now. So having all of these prospects behind Elijah Green is not going to do anything for me, because Elijah Green is going to be my long-term center fielder. I'm not really going to change that. I have no desire to. I signed Juan Soto in the offseason, was able to give him a big contract. I'm not getting rid of Juan Soto anytime soon, at least not within the next 5 to 6 years, and so everybody that's behind him is pretty much useless in terms of my actual team. But that doesn't mean that they don't have value and use to the organization. These are all then very important assets that can be traded away at a high value and get you something back in return that'll help your team in another place. So I might not need a right fielder right now, but I might need a relief pitcher. I might need a closing pitcher. I might need a catcher. I might need any of those other positions that I could improve at, and I could take these high value assets now and trade those into something more important for my team. Could you do that if you had a bunch of C potential bum prospects, D potential, F potential prospects in your organization? yeah, you might be able to swing something, but it's not likely. Developing up a guy like JJ Bleday, even though he's not going to be the all-star right fielder that I might have wanted him to be at one point in time, doesn't mean that he doesn't have value. This guy is going to be a central trade piece that could go to a team, start right away, provide a ton of value, and is going to fill out the trade bar significantly in comparison to if I just didn't have him on my team in the first place and was focusing on C potential guys or just focusing on the guys that I already had. So again, that's kind of also the reason why I tell you guys to focus on the potential range of players when we're scouting and focus on the potential of players when you're adding them to your farm system and adding them to your team, because it's not just about developing those players, but it's about the long-term value that they represent within the league. And so yeah, you could try to find that 60 overall prospect in the draft that has C potential, and they'll certainly fill the trade bar a little bit, but eventually, at a certain point, Guzman is guaranteed. This 47 overall A potential player is pretty much guaranteed to have more value than that C potential guy ever will, unless you're modifying that C potential guy to have better potential or something like that, or increasing his overall, or maybe he just goes off and goes crazy. But in that rare scenario, that's a very small percentage chance that that's actually going to work out for you. The percentage chance is that this guy, even though, on an organizational level, he would take quite a while to be valuable to my organization on the starting end of things at the MLB level, that does not mean that he's not going to have value. Within a couple of seasons, this guy is going to be a fantastic trade piece. Guaranteed 4 or 5 development points every single year. This guy's going to be a AA or AAA stud in no time, and he is going to be very important for another organization that is trying to build up and is trying to get those A potential players, and that guy's not going to be far off from starting on one of those rebuilding teams, and he's going to fill up the trade bar quite tremendously in an actual trade situation. The thing that you really have to consider is, what do you need to give up in order to make trades happen that are going to bring big time players back to your team? Let's say we were just trading for a guy like Adley Rutschman, for example. This is a guy that you're going to need to give up multiple A and B potential players for in order to get them back. You could give up high-end C potential players, but at a certain point, that's just not going to get the job done. So while you might end up with a bunch of C potential guys on your roster that are MLB potential or fringe players, you're still going to see a lot more trade value coming from those A and B potentials. Right there, I just randomly picked a couple of A's and B's, and I was able to get a trade done with Adley Rutschman, one of the top catchers right now in the league, one of the young up-and-coming catchers within the league. And so, yeah, you have to add A and B potential players to your team if you want to support your team in the long term. This is what top organizations do. Let's take the Dodgers, for example. Take some of the other top teams in the league, for example. What do? They fill their roster with great players by trading away the top prospects in their organization. Now, they're not going to trade away every prospect. Like, I'm not going to trade away Andy Rodriguez, for example. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go down my roster a little bit and say, hey, maybe I can develop up some of these other guys. Maybe I can develop up Henry Davis, who is not my top catcher, and I can trade him away in that trade. Maybe it'll take a year before he gets to a little bit of a higher overall, and maybe I'm not going to get Rutschman, but at that point in a year, maybe I'll be able to get a guy that's comparable to that next year during that time frame. Either way, what it boils down to is having those A and B potentials, because I can select a close to 70 overall C, close to 70 overall C, and a close to 70 overall C, and that's not even going to move the meter whatsoever, because those players don't have any projected value in that organization. But I could go select a few Bs, and that moves the meter quite a bit more, or I could sub out one of those Bs for an A potential player, and that's going to move the meter quite a bit. And like I said, once these players develop up further, they're really going to move the meter. So in a year from now, Lolo Sanchez might be able to get this meter done most of the way on his own, and then I just have to add a couple of additional pieces in on that. So the theory here is that you continue to try to stack. And again, this is not the most realistic approach. This is certainly not going to be the least cheesy approach to building a team in franchise mode, but ultimately it is still a formula within the game. And if you want to get to a point where you can support all of the top players that are on your team like I have with the Pirates, and I have a lot of up-and-coming prospects that are near the MLB competitive level, and I just want to supplement that with a couple of trades, I need to have assets that I can trade away. I need to be able to depend on all of these players at the top of my roster, so ultimately I have to be able to get more out of this section of my roster, the players that are in the low 70s, into the 60s, and into the 50s, because those are the players that are going to get me the pieces that send my team over the edge. They're the players that I'm going to trade away in order to be able to get that extra relief pitcher that my bullpen needs, that extra closer that my bullpen needs, to be able to take advantage of the players that are out there on the trade block. I need to have high value assets within my organization. And again, that's not to say that C potential guys can't go up to B if they have a close potential. That's not to say that C potential guys can't have value within an organization. That's not to say that a C potential guy like Eric Chen can't get up into the 70s and have value. It's just more likely, it's a higher percentage, and it's pretty much guaranteed through the development system for Junichi Ryu to be a higher value prospect. He's already a higher value than Eric Chen is, and in a year, that difference is going to be shown even more. 2 years from now, it's going to be shown even further than that. In 2 years, Ryu might be a 70 plus. In 2 years, Eric Chen might still be a mid-60s type of player. And so, yeah, it doesn't necessarily hurt you to have these C potential guys in your organization, but if you're really trying hard, you should wipe out all of those C's and D's that you can, combining those players, trading multiple C's for a B, trading a B and a couple C's for an A, and trying to package up and package up and package up until you fill your organization with the most high value assets you possibly can in order to just keep flowing talent into your organization. Yeah, some of them will develop up and they will play for your major league team. Most of them, however, are just going to serve as value pieces, assets within your organization to be able to make that one additional trade that's going to put your team into the World Series. Just kind of frame your mind in the perspective of what would a team like the Dodgers do or the Padres do? What do they do whenever they're trying to add to their team? They go out, they add big name free agents, but they also make trades with their top level prospects within the league. From a Pittsburgh Pirates perspective, two of the biggest names in the trade talks for Bryan Reynolds have been the Dodgers, who are one of the better rosters right now within the league, or they were in recent memory, and the New York Yankees, who everybody is raving about. They have so many great players on their roster. So what are they going to do in order to add Bryan Reynolds? Well, much like I just talked about, they're going to trade for Bryan Reynolds by sending some of their top prospects. You're talking about guys that are potentially being asked for, like Anthony Volpe and some of these A potential guys within the organization, guys that are near MLB ready talent, but that's what you have to give up in order to try to get a guy like Bryan Reynolds, who is one of the better players in the league right now and is going to fill a very important position for that team. What did we get back for Bryan Reynolds in our Pirates franchise? Well, we traded him to the Texas Rangers, who is another team that is talking about trying to make a competitive run because they just signed a guy like Jacob deGrom, who's been fantastic. They added other pieces to their roster. Now, in the MLB roster, it's not really showing them as a great team, but they want to try to compete with the way they've been building their teams. So you add a guy like Bryan Reynolds, and they're going to trade you a couple of top prospects. We were able to get a top center field prospect and a couple of top pitching prospects. That's what it takes in order to add those players to your team. You have to have those value assets. If you're not adding those value assets to your team, you're never going to be able to make those trades. You're never going to be able to make those moves to improve your roster even further, because you're not going to be able to expect every A and B potential player to automatically become a 90 overall. You are at some point going to have to move some pieces around to try and go get a 90 off of somebody else's team within franchise mode. That's just simply the reality of how it works. And again, realistically, you don't want to wait around forever for all of your A and B potential prospects to develop up to a point where you can be competitive. Again, once I get to a point where Keller, Contreras, and maybe Leiter or Priester are really good pitchers for me, I might then want to try to flip a couple other players, other prospects within my system to add a fourth pitcher, to add a fifth pitcher, so that I can be competitive in year 2 and 3, as opposed to waiting until all of these other guys make me competitive in year 5, 6, and 7, if that makes sense. So you're shortening your timeline by having better assets in your organization that you can then package to get better players in the future. So just kind of wanted to break that down for you guys and the theory behind it, and why you'll end end up seeing so many A and B potential prospects within my organization, even though I'm never going to be able to play all of them. You'll see a lot of A's and B's at pretty much every single position. Like we saw with that Oakland A's roster, pretty much every player was an A or B potential player. And the reason being, I want to be able to, in the near future, make a trade as necessary to bring in a top-end competitor that's going to put my team in the World Series or help to put my team in the World Series. So hopefully this video you found informative in some way or intriguing in some way. I know that there are so many different ways to run your franchise and build a team within MLB The Show. It also depends on your starting point. It depends on who you have on your roster, who you have in your farm system. It all depends on so many different factors, but nonetheless, this is one strategy to help build a successful organization. You guys have seen it on my channel work for years in a row, and you're going to see it work again with my Pirates franchise, the type of strategy that I take with this approach. So, like I said, hopefully it was informative. If it's, something that you are going to try to do or you already do, let me know that in the comment section. If you have a completely different approach, let me know that in the comment section as well. I definitely know some people like to approach it from an ultra realism perspective, and some people approach it from multiple other perspectives. So I don't fault anybody for doing it in any type of specific way, but this is a way that you can be successful in building a roster by trying to package up. So like I said, hopefully it was informative, and if it was, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for more, comment down below, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a good one.